Dangerous internet challenges are not a new thing. For years now, social media trends such as the Benadryl challenge have been putting the youth of America at risk. Leah Preston took part in this challenge where people record themselves taking an excess amount of the drug and attempting to stay awake through drowsiness to receive a high. In Leah's case, it caused a seizure and left her brain dead. Donna Rice Hughes is the president and CEO of Enough is Enough. She questions if kids even recognize the danger that they put themselves in when participating in these challenges. She also points out that the frontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, does not fully develop until age 25.
Kids are not supposed to be on these platforms if they're under the age of 13, period. Okay. Secondly, the social media companies do not have age verification in place to keep your kids off these platforms, except in certain states like Florida.
Social media platforms such as TikTok curate the algorithm to promote challenges such as this, thus leading to more children being exposed to danger. States such as Florida have taken steps to regulate social media for underage users. However, Hughes says there needs to be federal regulation in place.
This is why Congress needs to regulate them. And Congress has been very slow because there's a huge big tech lobby. And these companies are making billions of dollars off of underage kids.
While these tech bills slowly pass through Congress, she also says that parental resources are available on InternetSafety101.org. These resources are intended to help parents understand this digital age and make choices on how to protect their child. I'm Caleb Castile.
U.S. stocks are drifting near their records after trading resumed following a three-day weekend. Oil prices sank more than 2% and fell closer to where they were before the war with Iran. More news online at afn.net. And download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty P.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us on this edition of the program. Walker Wildmon here with you. Rick Green and myself, we're your host each week on the program. Once again, it's good to be with you on this brand new edition of At the Core. Our website is afr.net, afr.net. There you can listen live to our programming. You can also get past episodes of this show and all shows heard throughout the day on American Family Radio. You can also download our AFR app and have access to the same great content there. Well, let's turn our attention to the scripture. Acts chapter 9 is where we are this week. Acts chapter 9. And this is the long-awaited chapter of Paul, formerly known as Saul's, conversion to Christianity. It says in verse 1, looking at verses 1 through, 9 of Acts chapter 9. Then Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked letters from him to the synagogues of Damascus, so that if he found any who were of the way, whether men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. As he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly a light shone around him from heaven. Then he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, Who are you, Lord? Then the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goads. So he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what do you want me to do? Then the Lord said to him, Arise and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. Verse 7, And the men who journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice but seeing no one. Then Saul arose from the ground, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no one. But they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And he was there 3 days without sight, and neither ate nor drank. And so this is the beginning, really, of Paul's conversion and the first interaction between Paul, Saul, and Jesus here that intervened and miraculously turned his heart of stone into a heart of flesh. And so anyone who doubts the power of God or the ability of God to change one's heart and mind should look no farther than Saul becoming the Apostle Paul. That's Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. Well, we have, let's see, about 15, maybe closer to 20 seats left on our trip to Boston coming up in September. We can take about 110, and we're sitting at about 90 in the ballpark. It changes by the day. So close to 20 seats left on our trip to Boston. We're going to visit places like the Freedom Trail, which are multiple places, but we're going to walk the Freedom Trail throughout downtown Boston. We're also going to go to Plymouth Rock and Plymouth. Also, we're going to go to Lexington. We're going to go to Concord. All of these great places. And Stephen McDowell and Tim Barton will be with us for this tour. We'll be looking at America's providential history and God's plan that he had for early America and how all of that played out. And this is, of course, America's 250th anniversary as a nation. So what better time to visit historic Boston than now? So it'll be myself, my brother Wesley, and then Ed Vitagliano is going to be joining us. And as I mentioned, Stephen McDowell and Tim Barton will be our lead historians on this trip in September. You can go over to tours.afa.net to check out more information on that, tours.afa.net. We would love to have you join us. Well, one story I wanted to make sure I get to today, and by the way, we'll actually have Stephen on with us in the last segment to talk about his latest documentary and film. But one story I wanted to get to this segment is what was going on in San Francisco within the last week or two. You know, these corporations and these major organizations, such as the Major League Baseball Association, NFL, all these major multi-billion-dollar sporting outfits, for years have been participating in what they call Pride Month. This is where they flaunt their pro-homosexual, pro-transgender activism. They, of course, they abuse the rainbow and flaunt their sexual deviancy, as it's known. And but the appetite for this, my friends, is waning. And the number of corporations that celebrate this sin is also waning. And the public polling of this is not looking good for the other side. And this example is really an example of not just a organization such as, in this instance, the San Francisco Giants, continuing to push sin and push unnatural sexual relations upon the public in some kind of favorable light. But here we actually had San Francisco Giants players say, hey, we've had enough of this as well. We're not doing this. And so what they did is the San Francisco Giants program was requiring all of their players to wear this pro-LGBT attire during the game on their jerseys, the rainbow jersey, the rainbow hat, etc. And so these few players that are also born-again believers, they said to themselves, look, we don't like this, we don't agree with it, and so we're going to write scripture on our baseball hats in protest for us having to wear these hideous jerseys that promote a lifestyle and behavior that we fundamentally disagree with according to our faith. And so they did. The players, including their starting pitcher, Landon Roop, he took the mound during this so-called Pride Night, and he put Genesis 9:12 through 16 on his hat and a little white marker on his hat right beside the logo. And of course, that's God's promise for the purpose of the rainbow, God's promise not to flood the earth again in response to the flooding of the earth the initial time in the book of Genesis. And so the MLB snaps back a couple days later and says, hey, if you do that again, we'll fine you. But folks, this just shows the, number one, the blatant, in-your-face mentality of this wicked agenda. This agenda is not what they told us it was supposed to be, right? We were told, we were pitched these talking points over the last 30 to 40 years that this is love is love. I'm just gonna regurgitate all of their talking points. Love is love. You shouldn't regulate two consenting adults. This is just about two adults that want to get married. I mean, they went through all of these bullet points, all of these messaging items that all sounded right harmless to someone who doesn't have wisdom and good judgment. But we've been saying, including AFA, and my grandfather's been working on this, had worked on this for decades, but Christians have been warning the public and the church that, hey, this is about more than what we're being led on to believe. Fundamentally, homosexuality on its face is sinful. It's antithetical to Scripture, and it's against God's design for human sexuality. So that's cut and dry, very simple, not complicated to explain. But how we handle this from a public policy standpoint and from a legislative standpoint, that is where people really got all in the weeds, and people disagreed on, should this be illegal, should that be legal? But let me just tell you this. First off, my position on this from a high level, once again, I'm not going to get into the in-depth policy debates and talk about different statutes. I'm just going to tell you from a high level, here's my sympathy on this, okay? I think my position, according to Scripture and according to where we are in America and our Constitution, the government's job is to promote righteousness and punish the evildoer. There's nothing in Scripture that prescribes or permits civil government, authored by God Himself, by the way, to condone or push evil and sin upon the populace. There's nothing in Scripture where God says it's okay or it's good or it's righteous for civil government to promote evil. So the government should have nothing to do with unrighteousness and evil. That's a starting position, high-level position that is consistent with Christian orthodoxy and teaching. And so now that we're there, we should never have Obergefell, where the government says, yeah, sure, y'all try these fake marriages, thumbs up. And the government should have to recognize it. That should have never happened. All right? And we really should go back to pre-Lawrence v. Texas, and there's a litany of other court cases on this, but we should really go back to the place where homosexuality is against the law. And we, as Christians, we can debate, well, what should the punishment be? Well, we can debate that. That's fine. Civil, criminal, we could hash that out, and people may have varying opinions on that. But from a fundamental standpoint, the government has no business permitting, and in many cases, promoting this unrighteousness and sin that is not only harmful to the individuals involved, but it's harmful to the society at large. Back to the San Francisco Giants. So the MLB snaps back at these Christian players and says, hey, you can't do that. You can't ride on your hats. So the problem here is multifold, but the problem for San Francisco Giants is they're picking and choosing what ideology they're going to promote that has absolutely nothing to do with baseball. And this position that I'm stating here, everybody should be able to agree to. Christian, non-Christian, whatever, libertarian, etc. The San Francisco Giants baseball program has absolutely zero business promoting homosexuality and transgenderism on the baseball field. And that's the point where I could just stop talking and I could just walk out of the studio, except for what do we have? Like 43 minutes left of the program? But that's a position. How do you argue with that? And if you're the MLB and if you're the San Francisco Giants, this is the problem, is these so-called leaders in these organizations that make these stupid decisions, by the way. And not only are they unrighteous and sinful decisions, but they're stupid business decisions, pragmatically speaking. I would love for them to have to go to the podium and explain why this is a good move for a baseball program. Why should a baseball major league multi-million, and in some of these instances, multi-billion-dollar baseball programs be forcing players to wear paraphernalia and gear that promotes two men having sex with one another? Oh, well, I just said the quiet part out loud. I just said the part out loud that we're not all supposed to talk about. What this is really about. See, they talk about, oh, love is love. Folks, this is about an unnatural, unhealthy, and sinful sexual lifestyle that has been idolized in this country. And so when you frame it like that, which is the true situation here, then you lose a lot of people. And this is the broad reality that the public is beginning to wake up to, both Christian and non-Christian, is that we've been told that this is about love and this is about that and this is about this. But in reality, this is about condoning, promoting, and applauding very unnatural, unhealthy sexual intercourse by two grown people. And it's abhorrent. And when you posit it like that, which is the true situation that nobody wants to talk about, then you ask the San Francisco Giants guys, hey, what are y'all doing? And they have no response. That's the reality on the ground. We'll be back in a few.
For the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Jesus gets us, but do we get him? Jesus is God. He left heaven, came to earth, lived among us, fully God and fully man, to show us the way, to tell the truth, to give his life for us on the cross, and conquer death by his resurrection. Tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. And he loves us enough to pay the penalty for our sin. Don't be fooled by those who say love means tolerance. No, love means truth. Yes, Jesus gets us. Through repentance and faith, we can get him eternally.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Okay, here's an assignment for you, if you will. I want you to take some time and think about a getaway that gives you a chance to get together with other people of faith, deepen your walk with God, and make new friends, all while enjoying the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. I'm talking about joining AFA at the Ark, October 29th and 30th. This is a great opportunity to break away from the grind of everyday life and draw closer to God through special presentations from Patricia Engler and Brian Osborne of Answers in Genesis. It also includes entrance to the Creation Museum on Thursday and the Ark Encounter on Friday. Friday's dinner includes a panel discussion with Tony Vitagliano, Walker Wildmon, and Wesley Wildmon, Vice Presidents of American Family Association. This is an event that can fill up quickly, so hurry to afa.net/events to register for AFA at the Ark 2026. afa.net/events, and we'll see you at the Ark.
Hello, this is Ed Vitagliano, co-host of today's issues, heard right here on AFI. All right, I'll drop the Boston accent. I wanted to invite you to join Wesley and Walker Wildmon and yours truly on a tour of my hometown of Boston. We'll be seeing all the historic sites in and around Boston, and September is a great time weather-wise. For all the information about the Boston tour, go to tours.afa.net, and I hope to see you there.
Jesus told us to go into all the world and make disciples. American Family Radio is following that Great Commission everywhere our network reaches. You can help by becoming a Great Commission partner. Not only will you be helping to fund our efforts, but you'll also gain access to everything published on stream.afa.net. There you'll find educational materials, documentaries, and video versions of AFR programs. Learn more and become a Great Commission partner at stream.afa.net.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us on the program. We do have a petition up right now over at afa.net in support of these Christian MLB players that were protesting the promotion of sin and unnatural human relations over at the San Francisco Giants field just last week. So anytime people of faith, Christians, born-again believers, take a stand for their faith, a stand that likely could cost them their job and their livelihood, that should be applauded and they should be supported. So that's what we're doing with our petition over at afa.net, and we're letting the public know and the MLB know that there are thousands, now at this point over 30,000 supporters of AFA that stand up with and appreciate the courage and the conviction shown by these Christian MLB players just last week. So we appreciate their stand. And in this day and age, a lot of hatred, a lot of vitriol comes for people who have conviction, who have biblical courage. And so check that out over at afa.net. Well, Vice President Vance flew to Switzerland over the weekend for talks with Iran, with Qatar and Pakistan as the mediator. And the jury's still out on how this went. Was it productive? Was it not? There's mixed reviews, mixed information. But the talks did happen. So that in and of itself is a milestone, if you will, or a step in the right direction. And there's two factions here within the conservative movement, if you will, on this Iran thing. And a lot of this stuff I've said before, so forgive me for those of you loyal listeners that have heard me set this up before. But there's obviously the very pro-Israel side of the conservative movement, mostly full of evangelical Christians and, of course, Orthodox Jews as well, that support the nation of Israel. Obviously, there's a biblical and a spiritual dynamic at play and a biblical importance to supporting the Jewish people. That makes up a large portion of the Republican voting bloc. I mean, I'm talking 70, 80% at least of conservative evangelical voters that feel that way about the state of Israel. And of course, here on AFR, we have folks, or I know Jan Markell's not doing a program anymore, but we've had people like Jan Markell and others that give a very, very strong biblical case for why it's important for the United States to support Israel. And that's obviously where I fall as well. Here's what I want to remind everyone, as some people are kind of falling prey to this anti-Israel narrative out there, some of them innocently falling prey to it. Here's what I want to remind everyone, is that Israel doesn't Israel doesn't show military aggression unless they are attacked. And before October 7th, in that heinous terror attack by Hamas, funded by Iran, by the way, Israel was relatively quiet. Israel was peaceful. Israel wasn't running military operations in Gaza. Israel wasn't running military operations in southern Lebanon. Israel wasn't bombing Iran. Okay? Israel was simply existing prior to October 7th. And as a matter of fact, Israel actually had let its guard down a little bit. And this is what you won't hear from some of the legacy media outlets, and even you won't hear this from some of the so-called conservative media outlets that are persistently pushing this anti-Israel narrative. But Israel, You want to know why Israel had a major vulnerability and had let their guard down pre-October 7th? Is because they were letting workers, temporary workers, from Gaza into Israel daily, by the thousands, by the way. Why? Because it was good for Israel and it was good for the people of Gaza. So Israel was allowing workers from Gaza with zero Israeli citizenship into Israel to work and earn a living. And that ended up playing a factor because that created a vulnerability at those border access points when Hamas launched their attack. And there's evidence that some of those workers were scoping out the towns and villages near the border so that Hamas had the information they needed so they could slaughter as many Jews as possible. So Israel didn't have to do that. Israel didn't have to play nice. They didn't have to let these Palestinians into Israel to work, to earn a living, but they did. And it came back to not be a good decision, all right? Extending an olive branch, if you will. But before October 7th, this wasn't an issue. And Israel wasn't running military ops in Gaza, in southern Lebanon, or launching fighter jets towards Iran. But all of a sudden, Hamas wants to launch a terror attack and kill over 1,000 Jews, and then Israel responds and the whole world's mad. I mean, how right is that? So if Hamas wants to play hardball, Israel says, let's do it. And then the West, some in the West and other places go, oh no, Israel, you can't do that. You're being mean, Israel. Well, Hamas shouldn't have attacked them on October 7th. Then we wouldn't have this problem to begin with. But Israel is under persistent threat. Israel is under persistent assault by Muslims, the particular segment of Muslims that view Israel as an existential threat and that they shouldn't exist. This is why they chant from the river to the sea, because they want to wipe out and kill the Jews from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And so as we're talking about this and we're saying, well, Netanyahu should do this and Israel should do that and we should withdraw our military support from Israel if they don't want to play nice. Let's remember that we wouldn't be here even having this discussion or having an Iran war had Hamas, through Iran funding, not attacked Israel on October 7th. Every time Israel plays nice, they get attacked. And so if you're Israel and you don't trust anybody, well, I wonder why. Because every time they turn the corner, they're getting attacked. And they're not that big of a country, by the way. Not just geographically, but from a population standpoint, relatively small nation. With enemies, not at all sides, but at most sides. And between Gaza, between Hezbollah, and then you've got Syria. There's hostilities everywhere. And so that's the setup. Let's not forget that. Let's play this clip from, this is going to be, let's do clip 2. This is going to be Vice President Vance on whether or not Hezbollah can stop the fighting or not and the potential for peace. Clip 2.
You know, I know you're a Christian man, JD, and in the process of this conflict, we know that things opened up in Lebanon. A conflict opened up in Lebanon between Israel and the terrorists in Hezbollah. And so many Christians have been displaced, tens of thousands of them, and thousands have lost their lives as well. Do you have a message to the Christians in Lebanon?
Well, I would just say that to those Christians in Lebanon, keep your faith in Jesus Christ and know that you have a lot of good friends in the United States government who are trying to promote peace in the region. You know, the fundamental problem for those Christians, or the reason that those Christians face such violence, is because you have Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that has effectively taken up shop in Lebanon, Sometimes they're firing at the Israelis. Of course, that means the Israelis are going to respond in self-defense. And so there's this constant slow burn of conflict. It's actually gotten a lot better, Rachel, over the last couple of weeks, thanks to the work of the president, of Secretary Rubio, and of a whole lot of others in the administration. But sometimes peace takes a little bit of time to really take root. And that's what we're working towards. And that's really what we're working towards in the entire region, is just to change the way that we've done business. It's such a beautiful region of the world. There are so many Christians, Jews, Muslims who live there. Most of them are, of course, peaceful people. There's great economic potential. If you talk to our friends in Israel and the Gulf Coast, what they're saying is that if this deal really takes root, this could transform the Middle East in a positive direction. Obviously, we have skeptics of the deal, but I think we've got to give more voice also to the people who think that Donald Trump is on the verge of accomplishing something that has never been accomplished before.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to point out there, and the reason I played that clip is because some people are trying to position the vice president as being anti-Israel or hostile to Israel. And I don't think that's true at this moment. Could it be in the future? Who knows? Anything can happen in the future. But at this moment, I think the vice president is doing a pretty good job. And he's balancing what needs to be balanced in order to see if there's something that can be worked out with Iran. Once again, I don't think there's going to be an Iran deal, but this is one of those things, what will it hurt to give it a try? And I'll caveat that here in a minute. Nonetheless, Vice President Vance said in that clip, quote, "The reason that those Christians in Lebanon face such violence is because you have Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that has effectively taken up shop in Lebanon." All right. So the vice president is acknowledging the terrorist organization Hezbollah in Lebanon. The problem that the administration is running into is the same problem that every administration has run into for the last nearly 50 years. And that is that Iran doesn't want a deal like we want a deal. And I don't know how many times I can say this, and eventually I think I'm going to be right, and of course I'll let you know it, but there will be no good deal with Iran. There will be no signing on the dotted line of a deal that's good for the U.S. and good for Israel, because Iran is neck deep in their Islamic jihad and their apocalyptic ideology that chants death to America and death to the Jews. And when you have a country that is populated for decades with those type leaders, there is no deal to be made. And of course, I'm not the only one saying this. This is people that have been studying this and on this for decades before I was even alive. They understand what's at stake here and what's at play. And I'm an optimistic person. I want things to work out. I want the economy to go back to normal. I want energy prices to drop. I want to be able to focus on domestic issues. I get all that. Trust me, I want that to happen. But now that we're in this, folks, we're in it. We're in it. Let's play this clip that gives this less optimistic view of this Iran situation and their behavior. This is Senator Sheehy from Montana about the fact that Iran's just not wanting a deal. They're just so off the rails, they're hard to cut a deal with. Clip 5.
Of course, we hope this can be successful. I hope that Vice President Vance and Kushner and Witkoff are successful in convincing Iran to be a normal country and to open their minds and stop trying to murder their neighbors and destroy the world. But the reality is this is a murderous regime that doesn't want a deal. They don't want $6 gasoline. They don't want the straits to be open. They want you and your family and all of us to be killed. They want to wipe our civilization off the map. That's their national motto.
Nothing's changed.
And I don't think we've been successful in communicating that to the American people, that this isn't a regime that wants to negotiate. They want to buy time. They want to buy as much time as they can because President Trump's the only president who's ever actually gone after them head to head, who's shown them that if you kill Americans, if you come after our country, we're going to hit you back. And from Soleimani to Midnight Hammer to the most recent campaign, he's the first president ever to actually go after this regime. So what we're seeing now is what the rope-a-dope they usually perform, which is buy time, try to lead us along till hopefully President Trump and this team's out of office and they can re-up their campaign. So hopefully this is successful, but we have to remind ourselves we are dealing with a regime that will not negotiate in good faith. They want you and I dead and all of us to be gone, and they don't want that to happen with the snap of a finger. They want to happen like October 7th times a million. They want us to be wiped off the map from New York to San Diego in a savage manner.
So tell me if I'm wrong.
So I completely agree with Senator Sheehy and others that have been saying, look, Iran, they just want destruction. You can't trust them. You can't trust them. And I when I look at the facts on the ground, I agree with that. I do sympathize with that viewpoint. The ultimate question that no one has been able to solve, no political leader, no Secretary of State has been able to solve this matter, is when you ask the question, so what do you do about it, President Trump? What do you do about it, President Obama, or whoever's the commander-in-chief? I don't disagree that that's Iran's viewpoint. This is how they operate. They're not interested in playing nice in the region or the world. They'll forever, as long as the regime exists, they'll forever put on terror in the world. Then the question is, what do you do about it? And that's where there's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of disagreement on what you do about it and how much do you intervene. And you've got some people saying, let's just bring the regime down. Let's just bring it down. And then you ask that crowd, well, so what then? You bring the regime down, and then you've still got these radical lower-level commanders firing drones and missiles in the Strait of Hormuz. Even the regime's fallen, but the terror continues. And then you've got the extreme other side that says, let's appease them, like President Obama did. Let's send them pallets of cash. That'll make them play nice. No, it won't. So President Trump and Vice President Vance are trying to bridge the divide here and try a strategy that hasn't been tried either in a long time and in some instances just haven't been tried before. And so we should wish them the best. We should hope that the United States, in our interest, along with the interest of Israel, succeeds. What that looks like is totally to be determined. The jury is still out on it. But we should want, desire, and pray for the interest of America and for Israel, importantly, to succeed in this matter.
As we watch world events unfold and fulfill Scripture, it's hard to believe anyone could doubt God and His Word are real. And yet there are so many who either question or completely refuse to believe it. The God Who Speaks is a 90-minute documentary that hits the doubt head-on with evidence that proves God is real and His Word is the ultimate authority. Watch it anytime and invite others to watch with you. Just visit stream.afa.net. That's stream.afa.net.
The mission of AFA is to inform, equip, and activate individuals and families to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and to give aid to the church here and abroad in its task in fulfilling the Great Commission. The vision of American Family Association is to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training in the interest of cultural transformation.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association as we seek to stop the erosion of godly values.
How about this? Some actual good news on the healthcare front, even as costs just keep skyrocketing. So if you're 65 or older, MediShare now offers MediShare 65 Plus. Call them. You can talk to them about this. A lot of people are taking advantage of this now because even if you have Medicare Parts A and B, there are out-of-pocket things, deductibles and copays that just keep going up. And the whole point is to help you by giving you a low, consistent monthly payment that fills in the gaps. In fact, I can tell you how much MediShare 65 Plus is. For example, it's $99 a month up to age 75. It keeps costs under control. That helps with peace of mind. MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around for 30 years, and it's a community of people who help each other. Business owners, retirees, pastors, teachers. People love being part of it. Here's the number you can call now. They are easy to talk to. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
The crucial midterm elections are coming. AFA Action, the Government Affairs Division of American Family Association, needs your opinion on the role of Christian voters. You can do this by taking the Christian Voters in 2026 survey on the AFA Action website at afaaction.net. That's afaaction.net. In November, America will choose between continuing to return government to biblical values or turning away from these values. We could even lose the U.S. Supreme Court. We could see Trump administration officials impeached by a left-wing Congress. We could see doors for righteous government continue to open, or they could quickly close. As we approach this election, we want to know your opinion. So please take the Christian Voters in 2026 survey at afaaction.net. You will also have an opportunity to make a gift to advance AFA Action's mission of equipping Christians to make a difference. Go to afaaction.net. That's afaaction.net.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Walker Wildmon.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us on today's program. Well, a good friend of the ministry and a frequent voice here on American Family Radio is Stephen McDowell, and I actually mentioned Stephen at the beginning of the show as I was talking about our Boston trip coming up in September. Stephen's with us. He's president, co-founder of the Providence Foundation, and also host a weekend show podcast here on an AFR app and afr.net. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Well, hello, Walker. Good to see you and good to be with you.
Absolutely. I was just with you last week, and before we know it, we'll be together again in September. I'm glad that we get along because we spend a lot of time together. Hey,
well,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying those tours are a lot of fun, so we look forward to seeing all the people that sign up and come.
Absolutely. Hey, Stephen, over the last probably 2 years at this point, you have been working on a documentary called Educated for Liberty that the Providence Foundation produced and put together and made sure you've interviewed all the right people. But give our folks kind of your vision behind this film, and then, of course, we'll get into some of the key things that you discuss in the film.
Okay, Educated for Liberty explores how home-centered biblical education produced the free and flourishing nation of America. It's the reason we've existed 250 years, because the people were equipped and educated in the character and worldview necessary to live free, hence Educated for Liberty. But we also explore how secular education, government-controlled, mandated, compelled education, which has become fully secularized, has led to a great moral and academic decline. And so restoring biblical education is the solution to preserve this nation, to see that it advances and flourishes, and that in 250 years, we're still here.
Stephen, one thing I do want to get your opinion on, or your view on, rather, is the alternatives here. I mean, obviously, the government, so to speak, through various individuals and various ideas, have basically effectively like institutionalized education, or like turned it into basically like a business model. Like, we do, this is what we do. The government funds it. Top-down approach from the state level and the federal level as far as regulations and curriculum, et cetera. And so with that being the case, which is not what America started as far as education, tell our audience what things look like pre the K through 12 environment as we know it today. Because what we see today with school districts and basically government having a full run on the education model from a government perspective, what were things like before this current model existed?
Well, education in early America was, we today say, privatized. It's the right and responsibility for parents to govern the education of their children. And in early America, parents did govern. Now, so education was centered in the home. Everybody learned the Bible and the principles of the Christian faith, and not just theological ideas, but worldview, how to build a free society. That was very important. But they would delegate aspects of that to others. And so they would set up schools. There's a great variety of the models of schools. You know, some are school rooms we think about. Some would be just families meeting in a home. And so they would supplement the home-centered education to provide deeper education that some parents might not be able to give. Interestingly enough, most of the early tutors in America were ministers. They were the most educated people in the colony, and so they educated men like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and Noah Webster. And then some few would go to higher education, college. Only a third of the signers of the Declaration and Constitution actually went to college. So some few would go to college and others would apprentice. They would learn a skill that made them productive to be able to contribute to the flourishing of the nation. So again, it was privatized, centered in the home, supplemented with tutors and higher education for some, but everyone was equipped to fulfill their calling. It's interesting, the model of early American education looks much like the model of education that the children of Israel had. It was centered in the home. Then they had the Levites were the educators, and some were, the Levites were more highly educated in God's law. That was when they did it right, they could advance. And America, embraced that because I think that's biblical. It's not the role of civil government to get involved in the education of our youth, because if they do, it will end up turning into what we have today. It's more than a business; it's a monopoly
Duly
that
noted.
they have.
Yeah.
And in America, unlike most other nations, we still have some freedom as parents, to choose other options, but since they take all our money to support those government schools, it limits us. Many people are limited in other options and might be forced to use these government schools. But in our film, we explore, these main ideas. Parents have the right and responsibility to govern the education of children. Churches and pastors should support them in this. So this is a great role for churches to come. Okay, parent, you might not be able to educate your child, widowed, orphaned, or not enough money. We'll help do that. And so we explore that, and then we explore the title of the film, that if we as a nation want to live in liberty, it's essential that we have this biblical model of education. Because, if you leave people to themselves, they're not going to live free. You leave people to a sinful man, you leave him to himself, he's not going to flourish, he's not going to progress, he's going to spiral downward into more bondage. Our founders knew this, so they recognized we must educate people in the principles of liberty, which are rooted in the Bible, but for all of life, if we want to ever build a free nation. That's what gave birth to the United States 250 years ago. That's what's enabled us to exist 250 years. Unfortunately, in the last few generations, especially as we've adopted secular education, we haven't been educated to live in liberty. We've been educated to live in socialism. And so, a lot of our youth, as you know, are becoming more socialistic in their thinking because they're educated to live in socialism.
Absolutely. Folks, we're talking with Stephen McDowell, co-founder and president of the Providence Foundation. And this film that they have out in the last few months is called Educated for Liberty. Educatedforliberty.com is that URL. Stephen also hosts a podcast each week on AFR, on the AFR app and AFR.net, called America's Providential History. And Stephen, just give our folks a little glimpse on some of the subjects you cover in your weekly podcast.
All right. First, let me just mention, you can see the film for free. Go to educatedforliberty.com. It's free. The whole film, we've divided up into 6 segments because we think this is so important. So please visit that. We have DVDs for a nominal fee, but go to educatedforliberty.com, see it free. And in my podcast, America's Providential History, I look at God's hand in the founding of America From the colonization period up till the present, we've examined all kinds of important subjects on the founding fathers. Were they Christians? What were the principles they embraced? How did they give birth to this free nation? What miracles did God do in the founding of our nation? What are the faith of some of our leaders? All kinds of subjects. We look at not just providential history, but also principles of liberty, as we're talking about needed to live in liberty. We'll cover those as well. We put out a new podcast every week, and you can go back and listen to every one we've done before, and you can get a thorough education. And I've been teaching 45 years on this subject, and I'm using this time to present in easy to understood fashion all those ideas that I've taught and written about for many decades. So I'll keep doing it as long as I can, and as long as AFA and AFR graciously host the podcast.
Well, hey, it's excellent. You got a fan in Wesley and I. I'll be riding with Wesley, and he'll be listening to your podcast pretty frequently. So I like them because they're relatively brief, 20, 30 minutes, and it's just jam-packed full of practical history on God's role in America's founding and what's needed to preserve it. So, Stephen, we appreciate you coming on. Let me mention this URL one more time, educatedforliberty.com, educatedforliberty.com. You can watch the trailer and the full film, and of course, as Stephen mentioned, order a DVD as well about this latest documentary out by the Providence Foundation. Stephen, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Walker. Joy being with you.
Absolutely. That's educatedforliberty.com. Go there, check it out, share it with family and friends, post it on social media. Very, very good film. And a couple AFA folks are participating in that. Myself, Abe Hamilton's in that as well. And then very familiar faces and voices that you know from AFR and other ministries are in that film as well. Educatedforliberty.com. Well, as Stephen puts it rightly, the early America model of education that started in the home was the best model. And then we've since hijacked that model and turned it into this government-run, government-sanctioned model. And then, of course, over time, you had the secularization of the model to where God became and the Bible became less and less taught, to where it eventually became completely excluded from the public education model that we see today. And the good thing on this front, because not all stories have a good angle, if you will, but the good thing about what we're talking about here on the education front is that there is a variety and a surge in alternative education modes, alternative models to education in America ever since COVID. That really, I would say, awakened a lot of parents to what was going on in the classroom of our government schools and has led churches, Christians, ministries, and many others, and parents to explore and really found some alternative means of education, whether it be a full Christian school 5 days a week, whether it's more of a hybrid model or what they call a cottage school, just a couple days a week, the rest of the work's done at home, or just a full homeschool model. There's a lot of different models out there that are offered, and all of them have a lot of benefits, a lot of pros included with them. But this popularity in private education and church-led education just continues to surge, and that is a very, very positive trend. I mean, there is just a surge in enrollment in private education. And the beautiful thing is that, look, parents, many of these parents are just doing whatever they have to do for to ensure that what's in the best interest of their children is being done. And so this film highlights it. Stephen and his team actually interview people that started different forms of private education. And they go through it and talk about the benefits of the different models of private education. And I think the more and more popular this becomes, the better it is for the country, because the more and more children that can receive a proper biblical education the better. And the fundamental problem with this secularization of education in America, and by the way, this notion that education can be secular, that you can be educated and be godless, is just an oxymoron. It just doesn't go together. Because who is the source of all knowledge? God himself is the source of all knowledge and all truth. And so this notion that we can have education and have God X'd out of it is just a fundamental falsehood. It just can't exist. And so in order to have a proper, true, and beneficial education, you have to first and foremost acknowledge our Creator, who is the author of all things. And so that, at a very basic level, from the onset, is where education as we know it went wrong in America, is when we thought as a country that we could have a good education model, a good education system, and we can exclude the source of all knowledge, and that's God, our Creator himself. Another thing that a lot of people don't know is that many of America's early universities were started out as seminaries. Some of these Ivy League schools, if not all of them, were started out as seminaries to train pastors. And you go to places like Harvard, and they've got Bible verses inscribed in stone at the buildings from when they started. Now it's since been neglected. But this notion that all of America's universities have always been secular, they've always been God-hating, they've always excluded God, is just fundamentally not true. What happened with higher education in America is it was completely hijacked, and seminaries were turned into pagan institutions, and that must be changed. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.